afternoon. Magandang hapon po. Diyos maray na hapon po. That's the Bicol version. I should like to thank Dr. Chris and Marivic Bernido for asking me a second time. I think I did not pass the first time. So I have to repeat this time. I hope this time I'll make it. I'll pass this time. Okay. We have only very limited time, so I'm not going to waste much time. As they said, every minute counts. This is an experience that we have in the Diocesan schools of Pagadian. Probably the unique thing is that it's not only one school implementing the dynamic learning program, but all the diocesan schools are implementing it. And this covers students from, maybe the biggest school is around 1,000, more than 1,000, and the smallest school is 110. So we applied this program in all the diocesan schools at the same time. And we have been using it for the last 6, 7 years, 8 years, maybe 7 years maybe. And what I am going to do here is to share with you that experience of the program. Allow me to start with the school situation prior to 2000. By the way, it's siesta time. You may sleep in between. Just don't snore so you don't bother your neighbor. Our school, this is the situation in the school prior to 2000. I'll tell you later why I'm starting with 2000, although I have been with the schools from 1991. The 16 schools had an outdated vision mission, and this is even ignored. There were no manuals to guide administration, faculty, and students. Financial resources were very low. Part of this you will just see as a review of what Dr. Bernido said in his talk initially. Because the financial resources were very low, salaries were very low. There was therefore a high mobility of faculty members. The private school, the diocesan school is used as a training ground for them to go to the public schools. Then, because the financial resources are low, facilities were dilapidated and inadequate. And therefore, as a result, enrollment was diminishing. I am not sure if this is a picture of some of our schools, of your schools today. In addition, there was an overstaffing of faculty members in the schools, and yet they were given a lot of overloads. Then the school procedures were not clear. Therefore, it was not clear what the school really wanted. No money was left at the end of the year. And I think for some of you, this may wake you up in case you're sleepy. There was a strong competition among the schools. And all that contributed to the low morale of the faculty and the staff. Now, what about what's happening in the schools? Okay, we had traditional strategies, as explained earlier. There were no textbooks in the schools. Usually, the teacher copied her notes and asked the students to copy the notes from the board. There were no laboratory equipments. The only microscope that many of the students saw was the one in the book. It was not in the actual laboratory. Then there were no library references, and there were no library books either. Or if there are, it belonged to the 1900s when the Columban missionaries who established the schools brought books from Europe. Together with that, the teaching strategy is highly teacher-centered. the learning was too dependent on the abilities of the teacher. And when the teacher comes unprepared for whatever reason, she gives a quiz or she gives a homily in the classroom. So nothing takes place until the year 2000 came, and then sometime in 2004, I think, when you gave a talk to the CEAP, and then you offered to give the seminar to Region 7, and I asked FAPE at that time if I could send 4 teachers to observe and participate in that seminar. It was really exclusive for Region 7. But they accepted to allow 4 of our teachers, and I sent only 4 teachers. That was the nucleus of the CVI-DLP program. When they came back with all ideas, and they came back with some samples of the activity sheets and all. That was way back in 2004, something. And I said, will you be able to give this to our teachers? Now, I was thinking at that time, if I'm going to start this, I'm not going to start it on a piecemeal basis. I will not start it with one school muna or first year muna, kasi there will be a lot of comparisons and the resistance will be higher later on. So I said, if I'm going to start this, I'm going to start it across. So whether your school is big or small, whether you have 1,000 or 100, we will apply this. And so I asked the 4 teachers, will you be able to communicate what you learned in 1 week to the teachers? I will support you. To a certain extent, I had an idea. At that time, the only time I met the Bernidos was in that CEAP. So I had no idea what, but at least I knew what I wanted. I wanted the students to learn. And this would be a change. So they said, we will try. I said, okay, how do you swallow an elephant? You cannot swallow an elephant as it is. You'll have to chop it, swallow it, chew it little by little. So what did we do? We tried to simplify. We simplified the program. We reduced it to simple, easily understood terms and procedures so that all the teachers from the remote areas to the city will have a common understanding of the program. That means I conducted a seminar for the 180 plus teachers, all at the same time, so that the interpretation and the understanding of the program will be the same. So we only followed 5 simple S. First, we simplified it. Then, we standardized it. We tried to make sure that the procedures were understood and interpreted uniformly. If you talk of student activities, you know what you're talking about. Whether you are in the remote area or in the city, you should know what you're talking about. So, try to come up with a standardized program. Content-wise, the same for all, so that then I'll be able to monitor it. Excuse me. Then we tried to systematize it. Kasi there are 16 schools. So the work procedures, how to do it, how to work out the teacher's plan, how to work out the student activity, and how to divide the curriculum content to meet the learning competencies was done simultaneously together. They were organized, roles and relationships were properly operationalized. As Dr. Bernido said a while ago, instead of having only one major in English in your school, and you do it, because if you do it alone in your school, it will be difficult. Because the most you have are two majors, 3 majors if you're a big school. In this case, we have 16 schools, and I expected to have at least 16 teachers with major in English. So if you make the year-long plan, if you make the content it will be easier because you can easily divide the groups, and they're all English majors. But what they do for themselves, they do for all the 16 schools. In that way, this systematization was made easy. Okay? Then, we synchronized. What does that mean? We made sure that there is no single group that will work independently. Everybody was interdependent. I made sure that the English group took into consideration the science group and the math group, because we wanted to make sure that the values that we wanted to impart to the students for that year are integrated in all the subjects. So we had to synchronize. We had to synchronize the tests. We had to synchronize the whole program. When to give the test, how many items to give, what to expect at the end, that kind of synchronization. So when they give the test in the city, it's the same thing is done in the remote areas. That synchronization helps us when students transfer from one barrio school to the city school, they are not disoriented. They have the same program. So, synchronize. Then, the last one is we synergized. The teachers did not remain content with what is given to them. They had to make researches, and they had to strive for better program, better presentations and all. So with this, after one summer seminar, one week seminar in summer, we started in June. It was a daring step, but we did it. And then I made sure that we evaluated the program, because the mid-year, the semestral break, was an opportunity for us to evaluate what we did, what was weak in the program, what was strong, what needed to be remedied and all. These 5 S's enabled us to implement the program to form what I would call learning communities. The teachers was a group of learning communities. The students was also another group. Okay. Now, given that, I also made sure that they knew what to expect if they are to be effective. One question I asked them, can you give me one reason why parents should enroll their children in your school? If you cannot make a difference between your school and that of the neighboring school, whether that is public or private, then you have no reason to expect an increase in enrollment. You should make a difference. And I made sure that they understood what, because we happen to be Catholic schools, what a Catholic school is expected to be. And this is what we tried to do. We first, because there were no clearly defined objectives and vision, we defined the school purpose as a group. So we have only one VMG for all the schools in the diocese. In that way, it was easier for them to understand. They had a common understanding of it. Then, we also made sure that the procedures, the policies, and the practices were consistent with our VMG. I'll explain that later on, because procedures, simple things like, for instance, what do you do when the first bell rings in the morning? What do you do when your students line up? How do you form lines? Where are you? Little procedures like that contribute to the setting of the mind of the students for learning. Then policies. We made sure that the policies that are embodied in the manual are sound. Practices, that the practices were consistent with what we wanted to have in the school. Sometimes you can have, when I speak of practices, like, what is your practice for hiring and firing teachers? What is your practice for sanctions in the school? We have to be consistent about that. Then I made sure that they understood the 3 pillars that we are all constantly emphasizing in Catholic schools, namely that the educational programs are productive, that the apostolic community is vibrant, alive, and that the corporate dimension of the school as an organization is viable. And this is very crucial for us because the corporate dimension is often neglected especially in the private schools. This is not so much a problem, I think, in the public schools because they're government supported. But for private schools, if your tuition fees are low, that's your only source for salaries, and your salaries cannot go up without an increase in tuition fees. Now, all this contributed to the development of what we called the desirable attributes of the graduates we want to have. In other words, if we expect to have that beautiful roof on top of our building, we must make sure that the foundation is good. You wanted to have graduates who are socially and critically aware of the situation, who are academically proficient, who are honest, who are enlightened, who are self-directed, all character traits. Not so much what they know, but how they are, who they are, is important to us. So if we want to do that, then we have to make sure that these teachers have a common understanding of this figure that I am presenting to you. Now, given that, our idea really is like that of the Bayanihan. People working together in the school, moving towards the same direction. In the process of implementing the DLP, we needed certain character traits. C plus T equals LC. What is that? The C stood for commitment. We needed teachers who will be committed in the implementation of the program, because if our teachers move every year, and they are the ones who are making the year-long plan, we will not be able to move very far. So we needed teachers who will be committed. Why commitment? Because it demands a lot from the teachers in the beginning. Although now, if you ask my teachers, they will not go back to the traditional. They would rather stay. Then we needed teachers who are competent. And our emphasis in this work is really cooperation. Relative to practices, one of the things, if you want to cultivate cooperation, then you should try to minimize competition. Because for as long as the teachers compete with one another, they will not be able to cooperate. So, and then they need courage. Why courage? Because in the beginning, they had voluminous papers to check. To begin with, they may no more give their papers to be checked by the students. First, they have to check the activity sheets themselves. Then they have to record it themselves. Then when they record it, it's not sufficient that they record it. We have computerized it. We tried to minimize the work of the teachers, so that the paperwork is minimized by computerization. But our computerization is so programmed that it's something like this. That's why I say you need courage. We have agreed that if 80% of the class did not understand the lesson as seen by the assessment, by the test, when they record this in the computer, and let's say 79% only understood it, the computer will say invalid test or invalid assessment. So it will not be put in the class record. So the teacher naturally has to repeat her lesson. And if she repeats and she gives another assessment and it's still invalid, I said, what do you have to do? First, you repeat, then you reteach. If the third time it's still invalid, you resign. But anyway, this help. It takes a lot of courage, no, to repeat and repeat the lesson and not go on, because you have to fill up, you have to comply with learning competencies. No, we cannot do that. We have to make sure that the students learn. So they have to revise their lesson, they have to revise the student activity, and so on. Okay, this is for the C. Then the T. The T stood for time. Time needed to prepare the lessons, to work on the activities and everything. You need really time. In the beginning, my teacher said, Sister, wala na po kami panahon maglaba. Wala na po kami. I said, well, you will have to adjust and you will have to learn how to capsulize your lessons. You need time to do that. Then the E stands for effort. You need to have a lot of effort if you are beginning it, no? Why? Because the teachers have to learn how to research. They have to learn how to adjust their activity sheets according to the mentality of the students, not according to their standards. Because sometimes the teachers will say, Sister, hindi ho makapasa kasi hindi ho ma-meet ang aking standard. Since when was your standard the measuring factor in the school? The school sets the standard. Okay. And then, therefore, they need a lot of effort. Then also, they have to prove their ability. They have to learn how to make adjustments to all kinds, to the teachers, to the students, to the parents, because parents are new to this also. And most of all, they need to have a high morale. Because if they are easily discouraged, they will not remain. They need a high morale to do that, so that they will continue working in spite of difficulties. Okay? So, given that, we have C, which stands for commitment. What's the second? Competence, cooperation, courage. And T stands for teamwork. Only then can we form learning communities. Okay? Now, in addition, this is something we have ongoing in the school. I always have pre-service training. 1 week or 2 weeks before the opening of classes, I gather all the teachers together. We start reviewing our year-long plan. We start revising it. We start editing it. And then we start working on the student activities. I say, sige, if you cannot finish in the beginning, no? Now it's easier kasi they have the whole four quarters. But in the beginning, I said, we only finish 2 quarters if that's all we can finish. Remember, they're working in groups and they're working as a team. So the pre-service training is devoted to the 16 schools working together to start their year-long plan, to define their school procedures, and to plan together how to start the school year. Together with that, sometime in October, during the sem break, we don't have, the students have a sem break, but the teachers don't. The teachers go for what we call in-service training. What do? They evaluate. They evaluate the work they did during the first semester and plan for the second semester. Then we have a post-service training. The post-service training, at the end of the year, we evaluate the whole year plan, and if there is a need for an input or there is a need to get somebody to help us because we cannot do everything, that's the time we get somebody to give inputs, to have speakers and so on, so that this whole, after the post-service training, they can digest what they learned during the post-service in preparation for the pre-service training in May. Okay? Now, on the regular basis, I have the monthly meeting of administrators to monitor what's going on in the 16 schools. But in all this, there's always the formation portion. Then we have the monthly meeting, which is a follow-up of the monthly meeting of the administrators. What we took up in the administrators meeting is taken up in the faculty and staff meeting. Then we have the quarterly meeting of homeroom parents with teachers, which also include formation of the heart. So all throughout the year, across the stakeholders have ongoing formation. For us, that's crucial. Now, why did we decide to continue with the DLP in our schools? As Dr. Benito explained it earlier, I think I don't need to